wing conspiracy. He's a Fox News contributor, and he's going to help us break down this Mueller memo, what it means for President Trump. If you feel blessed by Byron's wealth of knowledge, pop in a donation to our Red Kettle. All you have to do is go to teamgallagher.org. You can go directly to the Salvation Army Mike Gallagher Show Red Kettle, teamgallagher.org, or go to our website, mikeonline.com, click on the Salvation Army banner at the top of the page, and please make any size donation you can afford. We're only like $2,200 away from hitting $100,000 in our annual campaign. So let's welcome on our guest line a man with a lot of pressure on him now, because in the few minutes we have together, we got to raise about $2,200 for the Red Kettle. Bryon York, are you up to the challenge?
I am here to help, Mike. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for spending some time with us, as always. It's been a while. It's good to have you back on the show. Of course, very important day in our nation's history, a day of mourning. President George H.W. Bush being laid to rest. I want to get to the funeral and to the real sense of unity that I'm feeling, and sort of the pushback on that unity in a moment. I also want to, of course, unpack the Mueller memo. But first, I'd love to get your take on the big media news. The owner of the Weekly Standard, which of course is a conservative publication, Bill Kristol's outfit, a very staunch Never Trump media organization. They said yesterday, the owner said they are exploring a number of possibilities, leaving the future uncertain, according to Politico, for this right-leaning publication that has largely opposed President Donald Trump's brand of politics. Bryon, it has been said that President Trump really has redefined conservatism, redefined the Republican Party. What's your takeaway on the possibility that this largely anti-Trump conservative outlet, the Weekly Standard, might be going out of business?
Well, I would need to explain to everyone that I work for the Washington Examiner, which also owns the Weekly Standard.
Wow.
So we have the same ownership, and this is something in which I can quite clearly say is above my pay grade. What I would say is,
I don't want to interrupt you, but let's put it this way. This is one of the few conservative outlets I've seen that has been consistently never Trump. Bill Kristol has not hid his disdain for the president. I mean, you got to connect some dots here, Bryon. It's as if their readership, if they were getting the views and the subscriptions and all that they needed, they'd be fine. Do people reject the Never Trump message who are in our circles?
Well, I would say, as far as the Weekly Standard is concerned, I mean, I saw these press reports, and apparently the company has not actually made any statement about this, so I would wait to see what they say. Because I'm waiting myself to see what this is. Now, on the general issue, the bigger issue about President Trump and conservative publications and conservative organizations, it has divided them to some degree. We've seen that with National Review. We've seen it with conservative organizations, and I certainly saw it in my reporting during the 2016 campaign. And it basically went like this. There were some conservatives who felt that Trump was simply unacceptable. Sometimes they cited what they would call moral reasons, or sometimes they cited policy reasons. I mean, Donald Trump is not, for example, a fiscal conservative.
Right.
And he didn't line up with conservatives on a lot of traditional Reagan-like conservative issues. Now, there were others, and they were in the vast majority, a number of voters who looked at this and said, this being the 2016 election, and said, look, this is a binary choice. It's either Trump or Hillary Clinton. I don't want Hillary Clinton to be president. And by the way, after having voted for Trump, many of them are quite happy with the results they've seen on some conservative causes, meaning
on many
regulation, on taxes,
judges,
especially on the judiciary, not with just two Supreme Court appointments, as if that's not a big thing, but also a record number of confirmations to the Federal Circuit Courts of Appeals. So it has divided it divided conservatives, but I think you've reported many times, we all know that Trump does have a very, very high approval rating among Republicans.
And and I don't take any joy in anybody losing their job. I mean, this is tough for a lot of people, but I'm fascinated by the sort of dynamic, as Politico points out. 5 years ago, the Weekly Standard had a print circulation of about 100,000, but by last year, that number had dropped to around 72,000, according to an auditing group. And the fact is, the Weekly Standard, at one time, I mean, they were viewed as being heavily influential during the presidency of George W. Bush. In fact, they were known as the in-flight magazine at the time of Air Force One. So we're seeing a shift, Byron. I don't think there's any question. There's no way around this. A Trump Republican era is dramatically different from the era of George W. Bush, and certainly his father, who we honor today and mourn his passing with this day of mourning and the state funeral, George H.W. Bush. It's a different.
I think you're exactly right about that. And looking at the H.W. Bush funeral proceedings and all of the people who were in that Bush administration really does drive that home.
Yeah.
And I think in the campaign, again going back to 2016, candidate Trump just blew up Republican and conservative orthodoxy on some things. For example, he absolutely rejected and blew up Ryanism on the issue of entitlements and spending control. On foreign entanglements, he really blew up Bushism and that kind of internationalism that you associated with
globalism,
with, the Bushes.
Yeah.
And on immigration, he completely blew up comprehensive immigration reform, which had substantial support among Republicans. So and those were not the only things that he blew up. So I think what happened, and I was thinking about this the other day during the campaign when Trump, remember, way before the primary. So in 2015, Trump took the lead in the race in the polls, and he never gave it up. But a lot of conservatives who were opposed to him believed that at some point he would just implode, or maybe he would just quit, or certainly he would be defeated in the primaries. And then I think they thought, well, we can just go back to the way it was, and we can go back to republicanism, circa Mitt Romney.
Right.
And I think at some point in the campaign and the primaries, maybe before May of 2016, when Trump essentially clinched the nomination by winning Indiana, at some point they thought, well, I don't think there's any going back here, because even if Trump did not capture the nomination, even if he did not win the presidency, he has revealed that a lot of the Republican electorate is in a different place than a number of the Republican elite and opinion makers.
Yep.
So Trump just wrought this change, but I think you could probably argue that rather than bringing about this huge change, Trump recognized that there was a big change taking place, and he essentially surfed on that.
Bryon York's with us, the chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Let's unpack the Mueller memo. The memo says that General Flynn should get a lenient sentence with the possibility of no prison time because the convicted national security advisor has offered substantial help to investigators about several ongoing investigations. I remember when I first moved to New York many, many years ago, and some of my Jewish friends said that one of the big questions that the Jews ask, is it good for the Jews? Is it bad for the Jews? Is it good for the Jews? Is this good for Donald Trump or bad for Donald Trump, Bryon York?
I think it's entirely neutral. I don't think it really matters that much, because if you looked at some of the cable TV chatter last night about this, the thrust of it was, wow, if Mueller offered no jail time for Michael Flynn, then Michael Flynn must have given them some super duper information. It's going to be really big, and Mueller will prove collusion now that he's got all this deep inside stuff from Michael Flynn. I think there's a big problem with that, because Flynn obviously never pleaded guilty to any sort of role in a collusion scheme or anything like that. He pleaded guilty to one count of lying to the FBI. And other people in this investigation have pleaded to the same charge. A man named Alex Vanderswan pleaded to it. He was kind of a bit player in the Paul Manafort thing, and he was sentenced to 30 days in jail. George Papadopoulos, who we have heard of, pleaded guilty to it. He was sentenced to 14 days in jail, even though Mueller complained that Papadopoulos didn't really cooperate with it.
Right.
So the guy who did this and didn't even help got 14 days in jail, which is not a huge jail sentence. So with Flynn, you have a man who cooperated, and this is also important. Michael Flynn is a retired 3-star Army general with 30-plus years of service to the United States, 5 of those years in combat areas. That played a role, and Mueller actually said, this defendant, meaning Flynn, is different from any of the other ones that we have seen, and that is he is a 3-star general with 3 decades of distinguished service to the United States.
Exemplary service.
That really,
that
that
matters.
really played a role in it as well.
Does this signal that we're getting to finally the beginning of the end of this thing? I mean, my goodness, it seems like every day we wait for another shoe to drop.
I have to say it looks that way, and let me read you something from the New York Times. Close observers of Mr. Mueller's investigation had hoped his team might provide revealing details about possible cooperation between Trump associates in Russia. But in typical fashion, the special counsel's office kept its cards closely held. I think there's another possibility, which is they're just not going to pursue that. There's not a collusion scheme, a conspiracy.
There's just no there. I mean, it's like, remember the Wendy's commercial, where's the beef? The beef here is the collusion. Where the whole purpose of the Mueller special investigation was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians in order to influence the outcome of an election. Have we seen anything remotely close to that, Byron?
No, it hasn't. And all the people who've been charged, first of all, Mueller has charged a lot of Russians with a scheme to try to influence the election. Okay, they did that.
We got it, yeah.
They're probably never going to go to trial, but there it is. They did it. But of all the people on the Trump side of the equation, nobody has been charged, much less convicted, of any scheme or conspiracy or cooperation with each other in a collusion conspiracy.
Wow.
Nobody.
Not one. Not one person.
Rick Gates and Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen, their big crimes were financial crimes. They were cheating on their taxes. Right. I mean, you get $30 million and don't pay taxes. And I mentioned Van der Swan, Papadopoulos, Flynn. Those are all making false statement charges. So Mueller has not charged anybody. And I would direct your listeners all to Andy McCarthy, writer for National Review, former federal prosecutor, who has pointed out many, many times, which is if you're a prosecutor and you have this target and you want to get him to plead guilty to something and you believe there's this big criminal scheme, you get him to plead guilty to playing a role in the criminal scheme so you can prove that the criminal scheme existed. There's a big drug operation. You've got the courier. You want him to admit that he was the courier of the drug operation, and then he'll tell you who the dispatcher was and who the money guy was and who the big planner was and who the head of the whole operation was. Right. That's how you do it. So he pleads guilty to transporting drugs. Well, in this case, no one has pleaded guilty to playing any role or been convicted of playing any role in a collusion conspiracy. And if the Trump campaign was colluding with Russia and Michael Flynn didn't know about it or wasn't a part of it, Paul Manafort wasn't a part of it, Rick Gates, the deputy campaign manager, wasn't a part of it, who was?
Yeah, who was? Because if not them, who? And it seems like the answer is nobody. No collusion. Close the book on this thing. And I can happily report that in the few minutes we were together, hundreds of dollars came into our Salvation Army Red Kettle. We're closer than ever to our $100,000 goal this morning today. And Byron, thank you, sir. For you,
Thank you, Mike.
It's your wisdom. Keep it up. Keep up the great work. I appreciate you joining us. The great Bryon York joining us. Yep, we're at $98,117, which means we're $1,883 away from getting to our $100,000 Red Kettle goal. You know what? We're about 10 or 15 minutes away from the president's body departing for the National Cathedral. Before the funeral, in honor of George H.W. Bush, will you pop in a donation? Will you help us get to 100,000 today? Go to MikeOnline.com. Top of the page, the Salvation Army Red Kettle banner, or just go to TeamGallagher.org. Do help the Salvation Army do the most good. Continuing here in the ReliefFactor.com studios. Go. The father and son team for Relief Factor. What a great couple of guys. And they're so honored that they've been able to work with physicians over the years and develop this natural product. It's 100% drug-free that is pain relief that works. And I'm a walking, talking example of it. I used to have lower back pain after my hip surgery. Not anymore. I take a packet of Relief Factor in the morning, a packet in the evening, and before I go to bed, and my pain is completely gone. Seth and Pete Talbot are so proud of Relief Factor, and of course, they've expanded with Relief Factor Energy. Great company. Go to ReliefFactor.com. Try the 3-week quick start for Relief Factor. For 3 weeks, $19.95. If it doesn't work for you after 3 weeks, notify Relief Factor. You're only out $20. What do you have to lose except the pain? Try it. ReliefFactor.com. ReliefFactor.com.
Mike Gallagher.